Debbie Arts, I'm here with Amanda Spears, and we're talking about episode 6 of Outlander, Best Laid Schemes, directed by Manton Hussein and written by Matthew B. Roberts. Amanda, it was a pretty good one. I think it's just getting better and better. What was your highlight from episode 6?
Uh, it's almost a little bit like she was trying to stop the French Revolution from happening. I thought that scene with those women at that dinner where she's like, maybe we should do something about the poor, and like she knows what's going to happen, so she almost was trying to change history, the French history, and they're like, oh yeah, that's a great idea, let's have our husbands have them move to the worst part of town. And I'm like, ooh, yeah, that is not going to end the way you would like.
Yeah, I hate to break it to you, but there's some really serious shit happening on the horizon for you people. Yeah, that was the impression that I got as well. There's a lot to talk about towards the latter half of the episode. Let's leave that for a minute. And I just want to focus on, for me, the MVP, using a sports term, for this episode, surprisingly, was Dominic LaCroix as Murtagh. He is such a great character, but I just felt I just wanted to just give him a big hug in this one because, he has the scene where he tells Jamie, that he's a simple man, but he strives for an explanation. He wants to know, why aren't you dueling with Randall? That's crazy. Why not? And Jamie is trying to tell him, there's a lot that you don't know. And then obviously he gets filled in later on in the episode about Claire and the fact that she's from the future. What about you? Did you feel the same way about Murtagh?
I totally do. I love Murtagh throughout this episode. And he's the first one who kind of methodically thought out, you've lived all of these years.
Yeah.
And he was trying to wrap his head around it in a way that I didn't think his character would, which I thought was kind of a nice twist. And I did love him trying to set up the duel at the beginning. I've probably been listening to the Hamilton soundtrack too much that I'm starting to hum that song I'm like, yep, that's number 2.
Yeah.
So
that soundtrack's incredible, but that's a whole other thing.
That's another story. But when you're talking about duels and they're like, okay, I'm going to meet their second, I'm like, yep, that's number 2. So we're all a little too well versed probably in that.
Yeah. I love the way they portrayed. That was really the director and the writer, their responsibility to kind of put that on the screen, and how they portrayed Jamie telling Murtagh. The pacing, the cinematography in that little courtyard, when you don't really know what they're saying, and I assume Jamie is speaking Gaelic or something. I wasn't quite there in terms of understanding what they were doing, but obviously Jamie was telling Murtagh about Claire and her background, and I just thought that was really beautifully done. And then the punch in the face, and Murtagh saying, you should have trusted me with that knowledge from the beginning. I just thought it was a great way to just get that out there, and now Murtagh's on board, and that's good.
Yeah, it's always good to have someone else on board, and that reaction seemed very authentic to Murtagh. That was like, why didn't you just tell me sooner?
Yeah. I love it. And I was really surprised, I was like, why is he punching him? But I thought it's just so apt for his character.
Yeah.
So anyway, I thought that was really cool. But let's cut to the chase, because this episode really sets up what I assume is going to happen next episode. I know you've seen episode 7 and I'm about to see it. And we won't talk about that until next week. But, Claire has a bit of spotting, so we think that, we as an audience, we start to worry about her pregnancy. And then by the end of it, there she is in the forest watching Jamie and Randall duel, even though the promise has been made that he wouldn't do that. And there she is on the floor bleeding. It's really, really heartbreaking. Talk us through your reaction to that part of the episode.
I don't know much about the 1940s as far as women's health care, but I thought maybe she should have known better than to run around. Maybe she should have stayed in the hospital, or
yeah.
I would have thought the technology had advanced enough that she would have known a little bit more of what to do before she got home and found the note. And yeah, I understand the point of why she'd want to go and try and stop this, but she's pregnant and she's in a carriage, and that can't make the situation any better.
It's yeah, I totally agree, and I guess you could probably blame that on that she was just so emotionally invested in finding Jamie and stopping him because of the effect that, you know, if he's going to kill Randall, that's obviously going to have a very serious effect on the future. She's always looking ahead, and I guess in that moment she became completely blinded to the fact that she was losing her baby, or she may be losing her baby. So it was really hard to watch, and yeah, it was so beautifully done. Again, in the forest there, Jamie is dueling with Randall. We hadn't seen Randall throughout the whole episode. We hadn't seen Tobias Menzies until the end, and there they were dueling after we were led to believe that Jamie wouldn't do that. So yeah.
Yeah, and it was a sword fight duel, which is something I haven't seen before. So it was interesting where Menzies ended up getting stabbed.
Yeah.
Oh, the irony of the situation.
Yeah, no. And so I doubt that Durandal is going to die. And my understanding is that he dies at the Battle of Culloden. But yeah, it was just really great. And for someone like us who haven't read the books, there's just been a lot of twists and turns. I just didn't see it coming. I didn't see Claire being in this situation so suddenly, and it really took me by surprise. So yeah, the other moment that I thought we'd raise, and this really led to the fight at the end, was when she found that note and it says, "I'm sorry, I must." Katrina Balfe really sold it, I thought. You know, she's so overwhelmed, she's clearly distressed, and her fight or flight response just completely takes over, and she really does sell it beautifully. She is just every episode knocking it out of the park completely.
Yeah, I agree. When she saw that note, just the look of like horror on her face, knowing what was going to happen, and one, dueling's illegal in France, and then what could happen and the consequences it would have on the future. It was very interesting, and yeah, it was a pretty decent episode. It's kind of setting up later episodes. So
Yeah, absolutely. Just going back a bit in the episode as well, there's another moment I thought I'd raise, and hopefully anyone watching this, please do comment in the comment section below, because it's what interests me is that when Jamie asks Claire for that promise that she will go back through the stones to Frank, I was a little confused and then wondered, perhaps, you know, my interpretation was, does Jamie need a better reason to spare Randall? At that time, he wasn't going to duel him. Than just because Frank is innocent. You know, he's going to be going off to the battle and needs to know that his love, the love of his life, and his child are going to be well looked after if she goes back through the stones. What did you make of the promise that Jamie asked Claire to make early on in the episode?
well, I think he's kind of coming to the realization that he might not be able to stop the Prince Charles restoration attempts, and they don't want to kill him, and they kind of like him. They think he's very charismatic. They can understand his point of view as to why he's trying, and it's going to be a hard thing to keep trying to stop him. So I understood in that moment, and it kind of seemed to me that he was going to leave Randall alone for her sake, and understood the reasoning, and it was I really appreciated that. But yeah, then something happened that made him break his promise.
Yeah, and it's not quite clear from the episode what exactly happened, but we do get some hints. And is the boy's name Fergus? I think it is. Fergus goes to Randall's room. He's in the same building where Randall is staying, and he sniffs some lavender. And I think that has something to do with it, because I think that's going to imply, and maybe we'll see more of this in later episodes, that Jamie it must just enrage Jamie, because that smell has a real significance for Jamie and brings back a lot of the traumatic memories of the last episodes of season 1. And I think he then flies off the handle and realizes that he cannot let Randall continue and has to go after him and finish him. So I hope we get to see more of the explanation as to how we got to that point, because I don't know if we kind of really got that from this episode.
We didn't, and I'm sure the next episode will be great. I'm not going to say anything because I'm not going to spoil it. But it was really kind of a nice that it wasn't really, it was all about Claire this episode. It was from her vantage point, and except for the scene where the wine was kind of being stolen, and
yeah,
it was very clever.
It was very clever, and yet again we get to see more of Saint Germain and Bonnie Prince Charlie. Always a plus when they're in the episode. But you know, I think there was one little bit of key dialogue that I wrote down immediately, because for the first few episodes I was one of those neophytes that was saying, well, why don't they just kill Charles Stewart? Just kill him. Be done with it. But it's not that simple, you know. Like, people who are really into this and who have read the books and understand the history will be the first ones to say, no, that doesn't work. And so even Claire says killing Charles Stewart will only make him a martyr across Scotland. That's really important dialogue, and I think that's going to affect the next few episodes. We'll get to understand exactly why they need to really be behind the scene, kind of trying to stop the purchase of this merchandise between Saint Germain and the Prince. And I think all that political stuff, I'm really looking forward to kind of delving more into that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I love the political aspect of it. And his father's still alive. That's the one thing that we kind of forget because we haven't met the would-be king. And I know the history. I haven't read the book, but I know the history of what happens. And so I won't. I mean, anyone who's got Google could, you know, figure it out. But so, it's without killing him, your options are very limited.
Yeah. Well, look, let's final thoughts. For me, it was that we're now hitting that point in this season where a lot of the really great shows seem to hit their stride around episode 5 and 6. We've now hit it with Outlander, because now you get to the end and you just desperately need to watch the next one. And I am desperate to watch episode 7. I can only imagine what's going to happen. I have some ideas. You've seen it and you are completely blown away, which we will talk about next time. But what's your final thought for this episode? And we'll just leave off at that.
I really am growing to love Fergus more. For me, it's just nice to see them have this like quasi-adopted son, and they really do seem to care for him. And I really am appreciating Katrina's performance more, because most of the weight of this is on her shoulders. So it was a good setup episode.
Yeah, totally agree. All right, let's join back next week. We missed out on hearing Ted's views. He's busy in New York City. Hopefully he'll be back for our next chat. In the meantime, everybody, please stick with Gold Derby. We've got plenty of coverage of Outlander, and we'll see you all next week. Thanks a lot.